Balthasar, Gaspar, and Melchior, the three wise men, the Magi who came from the east. They had a long journey and a dangerous one. These were not Jews. These were Gentiles, non-believers in the God of Israel, but through their study of the stars and the poetry of the world and the prophets of the nations, they came to believe that something was going to happen that had never taken place before. That even the heavens were revealing the glory of God and that a king would be coming. And they decided to take the lengthy journey from the Far East to Bethlehem. That's crazy. And you who are parents and grandparents, someday you can explain to your children and grandchildren what it's like to travel without GPS. Remember those days where you had to find the route yourself? And when you would finally get there, following maps, directions from gas stations or camel stations, and you finally get there. You're like, yes, I made it. Imagine the joy that these men had when they made it to Bethlehem, overcoming countless obstacles along the way. I can only imagine that before they left, when they began to tell their friends and their contemporaries about their plan to find the Messiah, the Christ, to journey halfway or partway around the world, I'm guessing, I have no proof of this, but I'm guessing that when they told their contemporaries their plan, they probably looked at them and were like, yeah, that's a great idea. And then when the three Magi left, they probably said to one another secretly, because that's kind of how we are, how we tell things secretly. They probably said, these guys' cheese has fallen off their cracker. What are they doing? They're crazy. But they were not crazy. They were not crazy at all. And then they made it. And then they saw the Christ child. And oh, the joy that they must have experienced in that moment. And the gospel tells us they were overjoyed at seeing the child. Brothers and sisters, that's what I want us to talk about today in these next few weeks, is about us reawakening in ourselves as Christians that kind of joy. As we begin this new year, thanks be to God, huh? Hello, 2021. As we begin this new year, we need to awaken joy within ourselves again. I know it's been a tough year. We all do. Hello, I haven't been living in a cave, and neither have you. It's been a very challenging time for many. I get it. Life is hard and difficult. And it was difficult for these three also. And it was difficult for these three also. Life's never been easy. It's never been smooth sailing all along. But what we as Christians believe is that the Messiah is here. He's come among us. He's risen from the dead, destroyed the bonds of death. He has sent the power of His Spirit into the church and through the church into the world. He will never, ever leave us. I will be with you always unto the end of the age. I will never abandon you. Even if a mother would abandon her child, I would never abandon you. And if you remain in me, you will bear much fruit. and you will become my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And if we stand in that place, which we need to as Christians, if we stand in that place and embrace that, it's not so bad, is it? It's not so bad. I know the world's tough and it's challenging, but we're Christians, and so there is a joy that comes from us because we know the hope of our call. And out of that hope comes a joy. I've spoken about hope, but I'll remind you briefly. Hope is standing and believing in a promise that we know will be true, because it's based upon reality and truth. There are false hopes, which are fantasies, and then there are real hopes. A false hope or a fantasy is if I were to say, I hope I grow big butterfly wings so that I can fly around. Well, that's never going to happen. There's no basis for that happening. Sorry if any of you were wanting to have butterfly wings, but there's no precedent for that. That's a fantasy. But a real hope is this. I hope that we can get through this pandemic, because our world has done it before. That's a real hope. I hope for the flourishing of my children. That's a real hope. I hope for my salvation. I hope that Christ will come again. Those are real hopes because they're based upon real promises and things that have really happened. So we as Christians have to stand on that place of hope. And again, when we stand in that place of hope, that joy can begin to reawaken. Not some silly fake joy like, oh, everything's wonderful, it's all great. No, it's the kind of joy that the Magi had in overcoming huge obstacles. Could you imagine traveling that distance in those days with the pirates and the robbers and all of the things that happened in those days? They had to deal with King Herod. And yet, I imagine as they were on that journey, their knuckles weren't dragging in the sand like, I gotta go to Bethlehem. They were going to Bethlehem. And so in the midst of the challenge and the trials, there was this joy, which is a fruit of the Spirit. There's this understanding. Joy is a firm belief that all things in my life are in the providence of God. That all things in my life rest in the empty tomb of Jesus. I think of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. You all remember Mother Teresa of Calcutta, Saint Teresa? I know I'm starting to get older because young people are like, Mother Teresa who? I'm like, teach your children about Mother Teresa, Saint Teresa. Saint Teresa, who cared for the poorest of the poor in India and then throughout the world. I had the pleasure of working with some of her sisters, the missionaries of charity. Amazing people. And what they do is the hardest of hard work. Mother Teresa was picking up dying people from the street, and she would bring him to her house of the dying in Calcutta. And there they would take care of them, and they would pick the flies and maggots out of their open wounds. But that's what they did. Would clean them and prepare them for a holy death, basically. And I imagine if you asked Mother Teresa about the ministry she was doing, I don't think she's happy at all about the situation that these people are in. She's not happy about having to do this work, but can she find joy in it? Can Mother Teresa find joy in this act of service? So she's not happy about the situation, but she finds joy in doing this work. Can you see the difference there of what I'm talking about? Does that make sense to you, that difference? No, huh? Stayed up too late Christmas Eve? New Year's Eve? Because we have to understand that. Because that's how it works. Because true joy is rooted in something like that. And that's what I'm calling all of us to reawaken in ourselves. Again, I know the world's challenging. And in a few weeks, I'm going to speak about some very difficult topics and challenges, things like suicide, which is an epidemic in our world right now. But we'll get to that. But it's tough out there. So, brothers and sisters, do we reawaken in us as Christians this hope which bears the fruit of joy? That life is worth living. There is still hope. That people can still be good to one another because we are filled with joy. As I think about Jesus, our blessed Lord, who had every obstacle against him, and I think about our blessed Lord Jesus as he grew, the shadow of the cross was ever upon him. That is, that Jesus always knew that that cross was looming right there, because that was his destiny and his mission. Could you imagine knowing that for yourself? That was your life's goal, was the cross. You imagine what that would be like? But yet Jesus didn't walk around gloomy and upset and depressed because he had to do that. That's not the picture that the Gospels paint at all. Rather, Jesus was resigned to what was there, what his task was given by his Father. And he prayed about it a lot. But Jesus was one who was majestic in his glory, in his beauty. Jesus was so attractive in all of the spiritual senses that people were drawn to him because there was a hope in him as he was the Messiah. There was a joy that radiated from him, a goodness, a mercy. People wanted to be with him. I pray that people will want to be with you, and through you that they'll want to be with Jesus. Because that's how evangelization works now. People are evangelized by Christians. It is we who spread the gospel now. And our world needs the gospel. It needs that salvation. And so we need to be like Jesus. Jesus never pretended that the world was A-okay. He understood it perfectly well. We must confront those challenges. We must confront all of that. I get it, and we will, and we need to. But we do it like these people. So in closing, our Holy Father has asked that this year be a year dedicated to St. Joseph. The year of St. Joseph. His statue is in the corner of our church. I invite all of you to take St. Joseph serious this year and bring him into your life, into your spiritual life. He is a powerful saint, an intercessor and protector. He's like having the best quarterback in the world, but he's sitting on the bench most of the time. He's our forgotten saint. We don't use him. We forgot about him. Joseph, who? Yes, Joseph. Bring him out. He'll help you. So light your candles there. Make a consecration to St. Joseph. Bring him into your home. Share him with your family. He will help you and I to be good Christians. So brothers and sisters, Happy New Year. Happy Feast of the Epiphany. Let's let that Christian hope awaken in us anew. And that fruit of joy begin to come. Not a fake joy, but a real joy. Because we believe. And if we don't do that, who else will? If we don't share the good news and the joy of the gospel, who else will? Merry Christmas.